7 feet of muscle, one crumpled check. The moment racism met its match. The polished glass doors of Crownstone Bank hissed open, and silence swallowed the lobby. The 4X champion, a thunderous presence of quiet determination, strode forward, his massive frame cutting through the marble-floored space like a force of nature. The bank manager's eyes flickered with an unmistakable hesitation, a subtle shift in posture, a barely concealed moment of surprise that spoke volumes before a single word was uttered. The 4X champion's hand, large enough to palm a basketball with ease, gripped a crumpled check. Not just any check. This was a statement. This was a moment of reckoning. "Mr. 4X champion," the manager drawled, his voice a thin veneer of professionalism, barely masking something darker. "We'll need to verify this." The word verify hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. The 4X champion's gaze swept the lobby. A middle-aged man hunched over unpaid bills. A mother silenced her crying toddler. Near the deposit slips, Darren, a 20-something with shadowed eyes and trembling hands, flinched. The manager cleared his throat. "Checks this large require scrutiny." The 4X champion leaned forward, his shadow consuming the counter. His voice, deep and measured, cut through the tension. "Scrutinize this," he said, sliding the check forward. "And while you're at it, look up who owns this building." A clock ticked. Darren's breath caught. The entire lobby froze. Change wasn't coming. It had already arrived. As the four-time champion waited for Peterson to finish his verification, he stepped back from the counter, folding his massive hands in front of him. The room felt colder now, and a faint buzz of whispers filled the air. Marble floors gleamed under ornate chandeliers, but the air smelled like sweat and fear, a stark contrast to the bank's polished veneer. He glanced around, eyes scanning each corner with quiet intensity. A middle-aged man flipped through a stack of crumpled papers, his shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Across from him, two sharply dressed executives whispered by a coffee machine, their laughter hollow. Near the entrance, a frazzled mother tried to soothe her toddler with one arm while juggling paperwork in the other. But the 4X champion's attention lingered on Darren by the deposit slips. The young man's hands trembled, the same tremor the 4X champion had seen in rookies hiding injuries. A story was unraveling there, and the 4X champion sensed it wouldn't end well. Darren's clothes were neat but rumpled, dark circles underscoring sleepless nights. He clutched a worn backpack like it held his entire world. The tension in the lobby thickened, unspoken worries choking the air. For many here, money wasn't a sign of success. It was a lifeline. Even the polished wood and gleaming counters couldn't mask the quiet desperation etched onto every face. The 4X champion took a measured breath, his imposing frame towering over the room. He'd felt these anxieties too, back when he was young and unsure. He remembered hiding his own struggles, not unlike Darren's trembling attempt to remain unnoticed. That was before mentors stepped in, before he learned to ask for help and keep pushing forward. Suddenly, the glass doors whooshed open, letting in a rush of cold air. A woman hurried inside, clutching a stack of envelopes. Her darting gaze revealed she was as on edge as everyone else. She approached the teller, leaving a ripple of minor commotion behind her. Still, the 4-times champion's focus stayed on Darren. Darren paused mid-writing, staring at the deposit slip. His breath grew shallow. The pen slipped in his grip, and he fumbled to catch it. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen, wincing like it carried bad news. The 4X champion noted the flicker of dread in his eyes. This was more than just a routine deposit. A quiet voice broke his concentration. "Sir," Mia said, approaching carefully, "the manager is still reviewing your check. It could take a bit." The 4X champion nodded, not turning around. "Take your time," he said evenly. He had no illusions about Peterson's methods, nor any rush that would pull him away from Darren's silent struggle. Stepping closer to the deposit slips, the 4X champion let his shadow fall across Darren's hunched form. The young man looked up, startled, eyes widening as if expecting a reprimand. "You okay, man?" the 4X champion asked, voice low but steady. Darren swallowed hard. "Yeah, I'm fine," he lied, his voice betraying him. The 4X champion tilted his head. "You don't look fine." He kept his tone gentle. Darren's gaze dropped, grip tightening on the backpack strap. He exhaled shakily. I'm just dealing with a lot, he murmured. The four-time champion nodded once, empathy flickering in his dark eyes. I feel you, he said simply. In that moment, he recognized a younger version of himself in those quivering hands, a reminder that sometimes a single word of understanding could be a lifeline. The sound of footsteps broke the hush as Mr. Peterson approached, clutching the Forex champion's ID in check. He paused near the counter, adopting a careful mask of composure. Yet the flex of his jaw muscles gave him away. Tension coiled through the lobby, an electric sense that things were about to get complicated. Mr. Forex champion, Peterson began, the corners of his mouth forced into a polite shape. We don't often see checks of this size from walk-in clients. The Forex champion's stare hardened. Walk-in clients? Last I checked, I own the door they walk through. A flicker of discomfort crossed Peterson's face, but he pressed on. This amount raises certain concerns. We must verify legitimacy. The Forex champion didn't flinch. You've got my ID. My name's on the check. My face is right here. Which part isn't legitimate? Peterson adjusted his glasses, trying to regain authority. Now, this isn't personal, Mr. Forex champion. It's pure protocol. We safeguard the bank's integrity. The Forex champion's eyes narrowed. Protocol? Right. Funny how it seems to depend on who's standing in front of you. A soft chorus of whispers floated through the lobby. Mia, hovering behind Peterson, glanced nervously at the Forex champion, then at the onlookers. Even the executives by the coffee machine had gone silent. Peterson's polished loafers squeaked as he shifted back. I'm simply suggesting more thorough verification, perhaps additional documentation. The Forex champion leaned in, his enormous frame causing Peterson to involuntarily step back. If I didn't look the way I do, would we still be having this conversation? The manager stiffened, color flooding his cheeks. Mr. Four-times champion, I assure you this has nothing to do with appearances. It's standard for any large sum, especially from a new account. The Forex champion let out a measured breath. Listen carefully. I'm not just some walk-in. I've been around, and I know how these things go. His voice dropped, resonating with quiet power. Last I heard, I have a stake in this bank. Peterson's eyes widened, the realization dawning in slow motion. Confusion flickered, then genuine alarm. You have a stake? That's right. I own part of it. The Forex champion's words were level, but they struck like a hammer. So when I hand you a check, it's legitimate. The respect, though, seems to be missing. Peterson swallowed, the flush on his neck deepening. We save it, the Forex champion rumbled. If this is how you treat me, how do you treat folks who don't have my resources? Silence pressed down on the lobby. Mia glanced at the mother juggling her toddler. The middle-aged man with unpaid bills shifted uncomfortably, and in the corner, Darren froze, pen still in hand. I'll need a little more time, Peterson said at last, voice trembling with the effort to remain calm. If we could move to my office, the Forex champion nodded once. Lead the way. The two men disappeared into Peterson's office, the thick door closing off their conversation. The muted hum in the lobby resumed. People whispered theories and watched the clock. Mia fidgeted by her station, anxiety etched in every frown line. Inside the cramped office, Peterson gestured for the Forex champion to sit, but the Forex champion remained standing, arms crossed. I hope you understand we must be cautious, Peterson tried, perched on the edge of his desk. The Forex champion's deep voice filled the small room. Cautious or condescending? Peterson's composure cracked. Mr. Forex champion, the Forex champion, I truly didn't realize. That's the problem. The Forex champion took a step forward. You don't bother to realize until it's too late. The world sees me as an athlete, but you didn't care to learn. I'm also an investor here. You see a big guy with a big check, and you assume trouble. Peterson's cheeks flamed. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. The four-time champion cut him off with a raised hand. No more excuses. You're cashing that check, and you're going to remember that every customer deserves respect, especially the ones who come in with trembling hands and no star power. Peterson nodded quickly, hands jittering. He reached for a file. Right away, Mr. 4X Champion. I'll address this immediately. This isn't about an apology. This is about changing how you deal with people. The 4X Champion's tone softened just a fraction. Don't make me regret the stake I have in this place. Understood? Peterson swallowed. Yes, absolutely. The 4X Champion turned for the door. Good. Now let's do what we came here to do. When they re-entered the lobby, every head swiveled in their direction. Peterson cleared his throat, addressing Mia in a strained voice. Go ahead and process Mr. 4X Champion's check, please. Mia nodded, quickly unlocking her drawer. The beep-beep of the transaction felt deafeningly loud in the hushed room. When the slip printed, she handed it to the 4X Champion with a trembling smile. All set, sir. The 4X Champion took it. The 4X Champion took it, gaze sliding to Darren across the way. The tension in the room seemed to release like a stretched rubber band snapping back. Thanks, he said quietly. He let his eyes linger on the manager, a silent reminder that some lessons needed to stick. Then the 4X Champion walked away, the hush in the lobby now filled with questions and flickers of relief. While the 4X Champion and Peterson vanished into the manager's office, the lobby's energy shifted into an anxious lull. Darren stood near the deposit slips, paralyzed by everything he'd just witnessed. His phone buzzed again, a text notification from the hospital. Payment due by 5 p.m. Darren's eyes darted to the clock. It was 4:12. His grip on his backpack tightened. He swallowed hard, imagining the worst. In his mind's eye, he saw escalated bills, hospital corridors, and nurses shaking their heads. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He needed money yesterday, and this deposit was his last shot, or so it felt. He approached the counter, but Mia was busy with another transaction. Darren retreated, nerves fraying. The manager's confrontation replayed in his head. What if I spoke up like that? But the words died the moment he pictured the hospital's final notice. Panic eclipsed courage. At last, Mia finished with her customer and waved Darren over. He placed a crumpled deposit slip and a wad of bills onto the counter. Anxiety twisted his stomach. I need to deposit this, he mumbled, voice unsteady. Mia offered a sympathetic smile, quickly counting the money. She noticed how thin the stack was, but said nothing. Instead, she passed him the receipt. Here you go. Thanks, Darren managed. He clutched the paper and stepped away, settling into a chair in the lobby's corner. His heart hammered as he checked his phone. 4:18. He pictured his mother in that hospital bed, the beep of machines. A wave of helplessness swamped him. Moments later, the door to Peterson's office cracked open. The 4-time champion emerged, tension carved into his features, but still calm. Darren watched, transfixed. Across the room, the 4X champion's voice boomed, but he couldn't make out the words. He's not scared to speak, Darren thought. How do I find that strength? His phone buzzed again. Another hospital text. Darren inhaled sharply, tears prickling his eyes. He blinked them away, furious at himself for feeling so cornered. But the clock was ticking, and he couldn't outrun it. The 4 times champion approached him, the floor seeming to quake under his steps. Darren hastily wiped his eyes, trying to look composed. Hey, the 4-time champion said, voice surprisingly gentle. You look like you could use a break. Darren's throat tightened. My mom's sick, he said, barely above a whisper. I'm short on her bills. I don't know what else to do. For a second, the 4X champion's expression flickered with recognition. He remembered being young, broke, and afraid. You're not alone, he said softly, lowering his massive frame to meet Darren's eye level. Darren exhaled unevenly. I can't just ask people for help. The 4X champion studied him. Sometimes you gotta. That's how you keep going. A tremulous moment passed as Darren considered his words. Something in the 4X champion's steady gaze made him feel less isolated. The rest of the lobby buzzed quietly, but to Darren it was distant white noise. He took a shaky breath, nodding. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to entwine with the 4 times champions in a way neither could have imagined. The office door clicked shut behind them, sealing off the murmurs of the bank. Freeman Peterson fidgeted nervously, perched on the edge of his desk, while the 4X champion remained standing, arms crossed. The overhead light hummed, throwing a stark glow on their tense exchange. Peterson cleared his throat. Mr. 4X champion, let me emphasize, this was never personal. We have protocols for large transactions. The 4X champion's expression was stormy. Protocols, sure, except those protocols seem to kick in harder when the client looks like me or doesn't dress like an executive. Peterson smoothed down his tie. I promise you, we apply the same rules to everyone. Right, the 4X champion said flatly. So, you didn't think to check who might partly own this bank? That's a real oversight for a manager. Peterson blinked, his composure crumbling. I had no idea. The 4X champion nodded grimly. Exactly. If you had, maybe this wouldn't be happening. Instead, you pegged me as a walk-in too big for his britches. He took a deep breath, a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes. For a split second, I remembered being 19, terrified in a new city, too afraid to ask for help. But I learned to speak up, and I'm speaking up now. This is unacceptable. Peterson opened a drawer, retrieving a form. I understand. We'll expedite everything. Let's finalize your transaction. No more delays. The 4X champion didn't move. That's the first step, but I want to talk about respect. That mother juggling her toddler out there, the man with the overdue bills, they're fighting battles you don't see, and they don't have my name or my resources. Peterson glanced away, face coloring. We never intended. Maybe not, the 4X champion said, voice softening just a fraction. But intentions aren't enough. Action matters. Don't make them feel less than, or harass them with endless protocols. Peterson exhaled shakily, nodding. I'll speak with the staff. We'll work on. The 4-time champion held up a hand. Don't just work on it. Change it. Fix the culture. Because if I hear about another incident like this, or see someone like Darren thinking he's not worth helping, he paused, letting the threat hang. We'll have a serious conversation. Peterson nodded more vigorously than before. Yes, absolutely, Mr. 4X champion. You have my word. Satisfied for the moment, the 4X champion gestured for Peterson to lead. They stepped out of the cramped office and into the lobby, where eyes pivoted toward them. Mia stood at her station, looking worried. The tension in the air was tangible. Peterson cleared his throat, raising his voice. Mia, please process Mr. 4X champion's check immediately. She nodded and did so without hesitation. The beep of the machine was oddly loud in the hush. When she finished counting out the cash, she extended it to the 4X champion with a timid smile. Thank you for your patience. The 4X champion took the bills, but what he did next wasn't in Peterson's script. He turned toward Darren, who was perched on a nearby chair, shoulders practically folding in on themselves. The 4X champion locked eyes with him, then took slow, deliberate steps in his direction. Darren glanced around, uneasy. The deadline on his phone loomed, but the 4-time champion's approach overshadowed even that. When the 4-time champion reached him, he extended 5 crisp $100 bills. Darren's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. I can't, Darren stuttered. The 4X champion pressed the money into Darren's palm, closing the young man's trembling fingers around it, a silent pact. Now go save your mom, the 4X champion said quietly. The same empathy burned in his eyes that once fueled him on the court. Tears threatened Darren's composure. Why would you? The 4X champion lifted a massive shoulder in a shrug. Because I've been there, he said, voice low. And sometimes you need a hand. No shame. Darren's words tangled in his throat. He clutched the money like a lifeline. The entire bank watched with rapt attention. Even Peterson stood still, red-faced but silent, as if realizing this was a lesson in action rather than corporate policy. Finally, Darren found a thread of courage. Thank you, he managed, voice quavering. The 4X champion placed a reassuring hand on Darren's shoulder. It's a loan if that helps you sleep. Pay it back whenever you can, or pay it forward. Just don't give up. Darren nodded, tears threatening to fall. The moment felt suspended, charged with raw emotion that pulsed through the lobby. Then the 4X champion squeezed Darren's shoulder once more and straightened to face the onlookers. The mother with the toddler watched with parted lips and the middle-aged man clutched his papers more gently. A sort of hushed reverence filled the space, broken only by the Forex champion's deep inhale. "It's not about the money," the Forex champion announced, voice resonating in every corner. "It's about respect for every individual. We can all do better. Bankers, customers, me, you. We owe that to each other." A faint applause started near the teller line, growing in cautious waves until it spread through the entire lobby. Even the pair of executives by the coffee machine offered stiff claps, clearly taken aback. The Forex champion gave a final nod. Then, with the transaction settled and a quiet vow left in the air, he headed for the doors. Outside, a rush of cool air greeted him. But before stepping into the street, he glanced back at Darren, the young man already on his phone, likely calling the hospital. A flicker of relief crossed both their features. They'd both changed something today, in ways only time would fully reveal. The Forex champion stood outside the bank, the crisp air washing over him like a reset. For a moment he considered leaving, heading off to his next obligation. But something tugged at him, Darren's haunted expression. He glanced back through the glass doors, saw Darren still sitting there, doubt etched into every line of his face. The Forex champion couldn't just walk away. He re-entered the lobby, ignoring the curious stares. Darren was slouched in a corner, staring at his phone. He gripped the money the 4 times champion had given him so tightly, his knuckles shone white. When the Forex champion's huge frame blocked the overhead light, Darren looked up in alarm. "Hey," the Forex champion said, voice gentle. "You heading to the hospital? You've got enough now, right?" Darren nodded slowly, but his eyes darted around. Yeah, I do, but..." His voice petered out. Fear weighed on every syllable. "I'm scared it might not be enough next time." The 4X champion let out a long, understanding exhale. "Could be, but right now, it's a start." Darren fiddled with his phone, glancing at the digital clock. Time was ticking away. 4:43. He'd have just enough time to get to the hospital billing office before they closed. "I appreciate this more than I can say," he murmured, swallowing hard. "But I can't just rely on handouts." "It's not a handout," the Forex champion answered firmly. "Think of it as a nudge in the right direction." Darren's shoulders relaxed, if only slightly. He shifted, standing up, so his height, though still dwarfed, met the 4 times champion in more equal footing. "Why me?" he asked. "You could have helped anybody, or nobody." The 4X champion thought for a second, scanning Darren's tense features, the weariness in his eyes. "Because I was you," he said finally. "A long time ago, people stepped in when I needed it. They believed in me before I believed in myself." Darren's gaze flickered with emotion he tried to hide. "Not everyone gets that kind of break." "True," the 4X champion allowed. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice so it wouldn't carry across the echoing lobby. "But if I can give it, I will. And one day you do the same for someone else. That's how it works." Darren pressed his lips together, nodding. The money in his hand felt heavier than just currency. It was hope, a second chance, maybe even the catalyst for a new life path. He took a shaky breath, mustering whatever courage he could find. "All right," he whispered. "Thank you." The 4-time champion patted him on the shoulder, his massive hand nearly covering it. "Go take care of your mom, man." As Darren darted for the doors, the 4-time champion glimpsed the determination in his eyes, a look that said he wasn't beaten yet. Watching him leave, the 4-time champion felt a small surge of relief that he'd done something tangible, something immediate. He turned and found himself face to face with Mia. She worried her lip between her teeth, glancing at the bank's entrance. "That was incredible," she murmured, voice full of awe. "I've never seen anything like it." The 4-time champion half smiled. "It's just what needed to be done. Not everyone can ask for help, especially when they feel like they don't belong." Mia lowered her gaze. "I guess I never thought about it. We see so many customers, but we don't really see them." Mahogany desks and sleek computers lined the bank floor. But the 4X champion was painfully aware how many struggles walk through those doors unacknowledged every day. "That's the problem," he said gently. "It's easy to miss what's right in front of you. People who need more than a scripted greeting." Mia's eyes widened, a flicker of indignation crossing her features. I joined this job to help people, but somewhere along the way, it turned into rules, forms, protocols. You know? The 4X champion nodded. A bank might have one job on paper, but that doesn't mean you can't find ways to be human. She shot a quick look around, making sure Peterson wasn't in earshot. I'm worried the higher-ups won't change. They say the words, but do they really mean it? The 4X champion gazed at the cluster of employees, each absorbed in daily tasks. They might need a push, he said, or a wake-up call, but if enough people want it, real change can happen. Mia seemed to weigh his words. I hope so, she said softly. Then, almost embarrassed, she extended her hand. I'm Mia, by the way. I never properly introduced myself. The four-time champion grinned, enveloping her small hand in his. The 4 times champion, she snorted a laugh. Yeah, I think everyone knows that. But the friendly moment grounded them both in the midst of the bank's anxious hum. The glass doors swung open again, a father carrying a squealing toddler, presumably in need of a quick deposit or maybe a loan. The 4X champion watched him for a moment, thinking about the mother he'd seen earlier and the middle-aged man with his overdue bills. Did Peterson and his staff realize how close people were to breaking under financial strain? The 4X champion let out a quiet sigh. Guess I should get going, but if you see Darren again, he paused, considering. Make sure he's okay. Sometimes a friendly face behind the counter is all someone needs to keep from drowning. Mia nodded. Count on it. She hesitated, then leaned in conspiratorially. You might have just started a revolution here. The 4X champion lifted an eyebrow. Let's hope it's more than a moment. People like Peterson can write memos, but it's folks like you on the front lines. She flushed with pride. I'll do my best. With a final nod, the 4-time champion made his way out again. On the sidewalk, the daylight felt sharper, the world a bit lighter. He didn't kid himself. He knew real, lasting change was a marathon, not a sprint. But at least one man had 500 extra reasons to hope today, and that was worth something. Before heading to his car, he checked his phone. A pile of messages, calls, obligations. He glanced back at the bank. This wasn't how he'd planned to spend his afternoon, but maybe this was what he was meant to do. One life change at a time. The 4 times champion stepped back inside once more, drawn by a nagging sense that the tension needed a final release. The bank lobby fell quiet as he strode to its center, everyone half expecting another confrontation. Mr. Peterson hovered nervously near the teller line, uncertain whether to speak or remain silent. The 4X champion cleared his throat, his deep voice filling the space. Before I go, there's something I need to say, he announced, letting his gaze travel over employees and customers alike. A hush fell. Even the toddler in the corner stopped whining for a moment. The middle-aged man straightened, clutching his stack of bills. The mother from earlier held her child a little tighter, drawn in by the 4X champion's presence. This isn't about me, the 4-time champion began. It's about all of us, how we treat each other, how we see each other. When I walked in here, I was treated differently based on assumptions. His eyes flicked to Peterson, who looked like he'd rather vanish into the carpet. The 4X champion let the weight of those words settle before continuing. But I'm a big name. I can speak up. What about that mother juggling her toddler or the man with overdue bills? They deserve the same respect. Subdued agreement rippled through the crowd. Peterson managed a wavering nod. Mia stood behind her station, hands clasped together, watching with a conflicted expression. The 4X champion pressed on. I get that banks have protocols. I'm not here to rewrite your rules. I'm here to remind you, behind every deposit or withdrawal is someone fighting their own battle. Don't add to that weight. He motioned toward the door. Just outside, I saw Darren leaving. He almost gave up hope today. Maybe next time, instead of letting folks tremble with fear, offer a lifeline. Doesn't always mean money. It could be a kind word or a fair chance. A teller whispered something to a coworker, who nodded. The mother with the toddler blinked back tears of relief, as if someone was finally voicing what she felt every time she stepped into a bank. Peterson stepped forward, voice shaky. Mr. 4X champion, the 4X champion. You've made your point. We will do better. I promise, the 4X champion gave a curt nod. I hope so, Apologies won't fix everything, but actions can. Every single person in here has the power to change how this place operates. How any place operates, really. He paused, scanning the sea of faces, making sure his words resonated. Respect isn't about bank balances, fancy suits, or good PR. It's basic decency. Don't forget that. A slow, hesitant round of applause began. The executives near the coffee machine joined in, albeit stiffly. Then it spread across the lobby, building into something genuine. People stood a little taller, as though they'd been given permission to hope for a kinder, more empathetic environment. The 4X champion raised a hand to quiet them. "That's it from me," he said simply. "Let's make this bank better. Together. Not just today, but every day." He turned to leave, nodding at Mia, who offered him a small, grateful smile. A gentle wave of relief washed through the lobby. The mother mumbled a heartfelt thank you, and the man with the stack of bills closed his eyes in what seemed like a moment of gratitude. As the 4X champion stepped out into the sun, he sensed the shift behind him. Maybe it wasn't a revolution, maybe it was a nudge. Either way, the point had been made, and now it was up to them to carry it forward. Darren left the bank that day clutching $500 in his pocket and a surge of hope in his chest. He sprinted to the hospital billing office, making it by just before closing. As he handed over the payment, his hands no longer trembled. Relief washed through him. For now, he had bought his mother time. Time to heal, time to figure out the next step. He didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a buzzing energy in his veins. He was done feeling powerless. By dawn, he was at his tiny kitchen table, scribbling a plan. Find better work, research scholarships, talk to advisors about finishing the trade program he once started. 6 months later, Darren stood at that same hospital reception desk, but this time he held a real check from his new apprenticeship. His hands were steady as he told the nurse, "Mom's staying in the best room this time." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. He'd managed to balance a second shift at the diner while attending evening classes in electrical work, fueled by the memory of the 4-time champion's words. Sometimes you need a hand. No shame in that. He faced plenty of setbacks, from late tuition fees to sleepless nights. But each time he faltered, he remembered the day in the bank, how one moment of kindness cracked open his future. Outside the hospital, Darren paused to check his phone. No more frantic messages demanding immediate payment. Instead, a text from his instructor. "Great job in class today. Your wiring project is top-notch." Darren couldn't help but smile. He was slowly shedding the weight of desperation, replacing it with hard-earned confidence. Time marched forward, and Darren used every waking hour to sharpen his skills. At the diner, he trained in the mornings and studied design diagrams in the back during breaks. At night, he pored over textbooks until his eyes burned. Weekends meant volunteering at a local community center, where he'd talk to teens who felt trapped by life's curveballs. "Someone once told me you're stronger than you think," he'd say, echoing the 4X champion. "I believe it now. You can too." He'd watched the spark in their faces, the same spark the 4 times champion had ignited in him. The day he finished his trade program, Darren carried 2 envelopes in his backpack, one containing the final hospital payment and another with a new ID badge for his electrical internship. He'd come a long way from that trembling kid in the bank corner. When the instructor offered him a part-time job, he accepted without hesitation, finally seeing a future that wasn't riddled with dread. He saved what little extra money he could, determined to repay the 4X champion or pay it forward. In quiet moments, the memory of the 4X champion pressing those bills into his hand still filled him with awe and gratitude. Darren knew it was more than money. It was faith in him, and that faith propelled him to believe in others. Back at the hospital, Darren found his mother propped up against pillows, flipping through a magazine. She beamed when he handed her the receipt showing a zero balance. "We're done?" she exclaimed, tears brightening her eyes. Darren nodded, grinning widely. "The 4 times champion helped buy me time," he said, "but I made it my job to change the ending." His mom reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I'm proud of you." They shared a moment of victory, proof that a desperate situation could be turned around with hard work, luck, and kindness piled together. That evening, Darren sat in his small apartment, scrolling through messages on his phone. He paused at one from a classmate struggling with tuition, uncertain if she should drop the program. Darren's thumb hovered over the screen. He remembered how a few caring words had flipped his life trajectory. So he typed, "Don't give up. Meet me tomorrow. We'll figure out resources together." He couldn't solve all her problems, but he'd be there. A shoulder before crisis overtook her. That was the lesson he'd learned. It didn't take a giant check to make a difference. Sometimes just a voice saying, "I believe in you," was enough. Weeks later, he sat at the community center after a mentorship session, sipping cheap coffee. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see the Forex champion. The big man had come quietly, wanting to check on the program's progress. Their eyes met, and both smiled. The Forex champion broke the silence. "Heard you're making waves, kid." Darren chuckled, a bit bashful. "All thanks to you." The Forex champion shook his head. "Nah, I just opened a door. You walk through." They talked for a while, Darren detailing how he was paying forward the Forex champion's gift, financially when he could, but mostly through encouragement. It was a full circle moment, proving that the smallest spark could start something bigger than either of them had imagined. It was Wednesday night when the Forex champion's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Freeman Peterson. The Forex champion debated ignoring it, but curiosity won out. He answered, voice guarded. "Yeah?" Peterson cleared his throat. "Mr. 4X champion, Hello. I've been thinking a lot since our talk about respect, fairness, and how to truly serve this community." His words rushed, almost tripping over themselves. "I need your help with a new initiative." The 4X champion raised an eyebrow. "What kind of initiative?" Peterson inhaled audibly. "A mentorship program. We have customers every day who struggle, like Darren. Maybe we can match them with people who've been there, overcome challenges, and can guide them forward." The 4X champion leaned back in his chair, eyeing the trophies and framed jerseys scattered around his living room. They felt oddly small now. "Legacy isn't just stats," he reminded himself. "It's who you lift." "What's my role?" he asked carefully. "We'd like you to mentor a few people yourself," Peterson explained. "You have a stake in our bank, and you've shown a personal commitment to helping. I believe your involvement could change lives." The Forex champion considered the idea. He'd mentored athletes before, teaching them about discipline and hustle. But this was different. It was about meeting people at eye level, not just on the court. Finally, he said, "I'll think about it." "Thank you," Peterson replied, relief washing over his tone. "I'll send details. If we pull this off, it could be huge for the community." That night, the four-time champion paced his living room, reflecting on Darren's transformation. Mentorship wasn't just charity, it was an exchange. Darren's will to fight had inspired the 4X champion to remember what truly mattered. By morning, the four-times champion was certain. He would do it. Within a week, Peterson had arranged a small orientation at a local community center. A dozen folks milled around, a mix of bank customers looking to get out of financial ruts, plus a few potential mentors who wanted to give back. The 4X champion slipped in quietly, but his presence couldn't be ignored. Heads turned, whispers spread. He scanned the room until he spotted Darren at a folding table, nervously fiddling with a pen. Darren perked up when he saw the 4X champion and stood to greet him. "You're really doing this?" Darren asked, eyes lit with gratitude. "Legacy ain't stats," the four-time champion repeated, almost to himself. "It's who you lift." The meeting kicked off with Peterson outlining the mentorship vision: weekly check-ins, financial literacy workshops, and impersonal goal setting. Then he introduced the 4X champion, who offered a short but heartfelt speech. "Everyone here has potential. I'm just here to say you can make it, one step at a time." As the weeks passed, the 4X champion found himself thriving in this new role. He met with Darren regularly, going over budgets, discussing career moves, but also diving into deeper territory: self-confidence, resilience, how to handle setbacks. Darren soaked it all up, occasionally showing up with someone else who needed a nudge. The ripple effect of kindness swelled. One evening after a group workshop, Darren pulled the 4X champion aside. "I want to do more," he said. "I see these kids in my neighborhood stuck with no guidance. I used to be one of them. Maybe I can help." The 4X champion grinned. That's exactly the point. Pay it forward, keep the chain going. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the community center parking lot in a hazy glow. The 4X champion watched young people come and go, some heads down, others laughing nervously. They could become the next Darren, he thought, or something even bigger. The next week, Darren showed up with a high school student who struggled with anxiety and financial worries at home. He's me, 3 years ago, Darren confided. The 4X champion and Darren teamed up, giving the kid advice on part-time jobs, scholarships, coping strategies. The 4X champion saw the teen's eyes spark with possibility. Meanwhile, Peterson reported back. The bank was slowly shifting. Employees were asked to attend to empathy training, and some official policies regarding large checks were being revised to avoid the fiasco that happened with the 4X champion. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start. Mia, the teller, messaged the 4X champion that the staff was cautiously optimistic. The 4X champion's days filled with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Sure, basketball accolades were incredible, but guiding someone from rock bottom to self-sufficiency brought a deeper fulfillment. In quieter moments, he recalled his own mentors, family members, coaches, even strangers who'd believed in him. Now it was his turn to keep the cycle going. He and Darren developed a comfortable rhythm, exchanging text updates, meeting on Saturdays to review goals. Darren's confidence soared, and so did his willingness to mentor others. On more than one occasion, the 4-time champion found Darren coaching newcomers at the center, braiding in his own success story. Pride flickered in the 4X champion's chest whenever he saw it. During one of these sessions, Darren cornered the 4X champion in the hallway. I've saved up some money, he said, pressing an envelope into the 4X champion's hand. I want to pay back what you gave me. The 4-time champion glanced at the envelope, then handed it back. Use it to help someone else. That's the return I want. Darren's eyes brimmed with gratitude, though he tried to hide it with a quick nod. Yes, sir, he said, stuffing the envelope into his pocket. I know exactly who needs it. As the mentorship program expanded, local news picked up the story. Bank manager teams with NBA legend for community mentorship. Peterson fielded questions about moral obligations, while the 4-time champion and Darren exemplified success stories. The coverage brought more volunteers, more participants, some right on the verge of giving up, but now glimpsing hope. One Saturday at the center, the 4-time champion finished a workshop and glanced at the old trophies adorning the shelves. They no longer dazzled him like they once did. This was the real trophy, seeing men and women stand taller, fight harder, because they knew someone believed in them. A grin spread across his face. Legacy wasn't about what he'd won, it was about what he was building in others. Months slipped by, and the mentorship program flourished. Darren was no longer just a participant, he was a leader, guiding newcomers who felt overwhelmed by financial burdens, family crises, or simple lack of direction. One evening, Darren walked into the community center carrying a grocery bag. He headed straight to a teen boy hunched over a worn backpack. The kid looked up, eyes brimming with the same fear Darren once wore. Darren pulled out a small packet of resources, job listings, budgeting tips, along with a few groceries. I've been where you are, he told him gently. You're not alone. The 4X champion observed from across the room, a quiet pride warming his chest. This was the ripple effect in action. Each act of kindness inspired another, branching out like a network of hope. He thought about how far Darren had come. Once a trembling figure at the bank, now an anchor to others. Meanwhile, the bank itself posted a small plaque near the entrance. Respect is the only currency here. Mia had texted the 4-time champion a photo, and he'd smiled. Symbolic, yes. But maybe it would remind people that protocols weren't everything. People mattered. One afternoon, while the 4X champion was setting up chairs for a workshop, he caught a glimpse of Peterson quietly volunteering at a sign-in table. The manager's polished demeanor was still intact, but the 4-time champion noticed genuine effort in the way he greeted attendees. Perhaps the bank's culture had shifted a bit, or maybe it was just Peterson himself who'd realized transformation was possible. The community center buzzed with the chatter of folks united by shared determination. At a corner table, a single mom filled out a scholarship form, aided by one of Darren's new mentees. Across the room, a retired accountant explained credit building to a small group, pointing to a whiteboard. Everyone had a piece of the puzzle to offer. Late that evening, Darren found the 4X champion who was stacking leftover materials. "We had a record turnout," Darren said, beaming. 30 new signups. The four-time champion clapped him on the back. "That's big. The more, the merrier." Darren hesitated, then spoke softly. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't stepped in at the bank. You changed my life," the four times champion. The 4X champion waved a dismissive hand but smiled. "You changed your own life. I just gave you a little push." They both knew it was more than a little push. It was hope, the kind that cascaded into unstoppable momentum when someone truly believed in themselves. Across the room, a volunteer flipped off the lights, signaling they were closing up. Darren and the four times champion stepped into the cool night air. Stars dotted the sky, a reminder that some lights shine best in the darkness. As they locked up, the four-time champion paused, gazing at the building. So many stories had converged here, each one shaped by empathy and a willingness to step in. He remembered how easy it was to ignore someone silently drowning in worry until you decided not to. Darren pocketed the keys, flashing the 4X champion an enthusiastic grin. "Ready for next week?" The 4X champion nodded, thinking of all the people who still needed a hand. "Always." Later that night, the 4X champion sat alone in his living room, the city lights flickering through the window. He let his eyes drift to a photo of his younger self, all raw ambition and hidden insecurities. Back then, he never imagined he'd stand in a bank lobby, defending respect for strangers, or that he'd mentor someone like Darren, who in turn was changing other lives. He inhaled, recalling the hush that fell when he confronted Peterson, the stunned gratitude in Darren's eyes, and the quiet applause echoing through the marble-floored lobby. In that moment, he'd realized a fundamental truth. Changing circumstances for one person creates a ripple you can't always see, but it's there, and it spreads. His phone chimed, a text from Darren. "Another great session tonight." "Thanks again, big man." The 4X champion smiled. He didn't need thanks. The transformation spoke for itself. Darren was living proof that one person's yes could cut through a lifetime of no. Standing, the four times champion moved to the window, watching headlights stream past in the distance. The world felt both vast and intimately connected, tiny sparks of humanity bridging gaps. He thought of the single mom, the man with overdue bills, the young teller named Mia, and even Peterson, who'd found a way to look beyond the rules. He remembered someone once telling him, "Success isn't just about you. It's about who you bring with you." Tonight, that truth felt more tangible than any trophy or career milestone. A check had been cashed, but something far more valuable had been deposited into a community that day: belief. In the quiet reflection of the glass, the 4X champion saw himself not as a celebrity, but as a mentor, a supporter. He thought about the uncertain future, how many more challenges people would face, but he also thought about the unstoppable force of empathy when people chose to stand together. "Change doesn't come," he whispered to no one in particular, repeating the words he'd once said at the start of this journey. "It's already here." He could almost feel that ripple moving outward, fueling new possibilities. His gaze settled on the photo again, the wide-eyed kid with everything ahead of him, and he allowed himself a small grin. Maybe that kid had surpassed his own dreams, not in stats or rings, but in solidarity and compassion. The 4X champion walked away from the window, the city lights still dancing behind him. Tomorrow waited with fresh challenges and fresh chances to make a difference. And he was ready to keep forging ripples, one act of kindness at a time.